Hey guys, in this video we're going to be translating some sentences to help you get ready for your Unit 4 test. Now, before we actually start translating any sentences, I want to remind you of the 4 basic rules of translating any Latin sentence. So here they are. Number 1 is we have to find the verb and we need to parse the verb. Find the verb and parse it. This is really, really important. You don't want to do anything else until you find the verb and then parse it. And then secondly, you're going to parse anything else in the sentence that can be parsed. Some things can't be parsed, like prepositions or certain numbers, but in general, you want to try to parse everything else that you can. And then after you've done that, you want to label every word in the sentence. Even those words that can't be parsed, they can be labeled. Now, by labels, we mean things like subject, noun, direct object, verb, linking verb, preposition, all those things. The last step in translating a sentence is to actually translate it. So you don't want to move to the step of translating before you've done these other things. It's true that with shorter sentences, you can sometimes guess and get it right. But it's better to walk through the steps. It is better to do all these things so that when you get to more complicated sentences, and some of the sentences we'll do today are a little bit more complicated, you're no longer in guessing mode. With short sentences, sometimes you can guess and get it right because there aren't a whole lot of options. But the more complicated a sentence gets, especially in the context of a paragraph, the less likely you are to guess and get it right. So let's make sure that we're walking through these steps with every sentence. All right, we're starting with a fairly simple sentence, and it reads, Puella in casam ambulat. Puella in casam ambulat. Now, remember, the first thing that we want to do is to find our verb and parse it. And you can do that by knowing your vocabulary words, but also simply by recognizing verb endings. And so here we have a verb ending, ambulat, that T from the present tense endings, OST, mustis unt. OST, mustis unt. So that when we come to parse this particular verb, OST, 1, 2, 3, that's third person. It's in the singular column, and those are, of course, the present tense endings. So we're going to label it as a present tense. And it gets the label of verb there right at the beginning. It's an action verb. We simply label those with a V. The only other kind of verb that we're going to see in our sentences is a linking verb, which would be any form of sum in any tense. Those work a bit differently. Typically, you find your action verbs near the end of the sentence in Latin, and you find your linking verbs somewhere in the middle. Latin word order is flexible, so it doesn't have to be the case, but that's normal, and so that's what you'll be seeing in most of these sentences. So first, look at the end of the sentence for an action verb. If there's not one there, then begin to look for a form of sum. All right, so we've now successfully found and parsed our verb, and the next step is to parse all the other words in the sentence. And we essentially have only 2 other words that we need to parse. We have puella, which ends in an A, and casam, which ends in that am ending. Both of these are first declension nouns. So we're going to look at our I, autumn, is, os, is endings. And when we do that, we see very quickly that puella is feminine, it is singular, and it is nominative, the very first ending on the list. And then casam is also feminine. Most of our first declension words are feminine. It's in the singular column, the left-hand column, just like the in puella. And it is accusative, I, Now that we've got everything parsed, we should be able to label things. Our nominative noun, which is the only nominative noun in the sentence, is going to be the subject. The nominative case is used for the subject of a sentence in Latin. It usually comes toward the beginning of the sentence, but it can be found in other places. And then the accusative ending would normally be used for the direct object. However, you'll notice that we have a preposition, the word in. And the accusative following a preposition is still an object, but it's no longer a direct object. It is instead the object of the preposition. So think of the accusative case as the case of the object. By itself, it's the direct object, but following a preposition, it will be the object of that preposition. So now we've gone through steps 1 through 3. We found our verb, we parsed it, we parsed everything else, we've labeled everything. Now it's just a matter of rearranging the words according to English word order so that we can get this translated correctly. Now, of course, you need to know your vocabulary, but these are old words that all of you should know. So our subject is girl, and we get to choose an article. We can say the girl or a girl. I'm going to go with the girl. And next in English comes the verb. The girl walks. It's present tense, so we don't want to say walked. We can say walks or is walking. I'm going to go this time with is walking. Is walking. And then we have our prepositional phrase, which can be helpful to mark it off. We didn't do that earlier, but it can be very helpful to sort of mark it off so that you see it separate from the rest of the sentence. Now, this little preposition in right here can have two different meanings. It can mean in or on when it's followed by an accusative case, or it can mean into or onto followed by an accusative case, or it can mean in or on when followed by the ablative case. Here we have that accusative case, so it's going to mean into or onto. It's followed by the word house, so it makes good sense to say the girl is walking into, again, the or a. I'm going to say the house. I'm going to squeeze all this together to fit it in. There we go. The girl is walking into the house. It's a fairly simple sentence, but it's a good way to get us started walking through the steps to figure out the meaning of the sentence. Here's our next sentence. Dua pueri parvi puellam vident. Now, we're going to do the same steps as we did last time, which means the first thing we want to do is find our verb and parse it. Here, again, at the end of the sentence, that's to be expected, we have a verb ending. Again, present tense, ost, mustis, und. This time, it's third person plural because it's in the right-hand column, but still present tense. So this verb all by itself means they see or they are seeing. Now, the next thing we want to do, of course, is parse all of our nouns. We can go ahead and label this as a verb since we know, but we need to parse all of our nouns, adjectives, and anything else that can be parsed. But as we do that, we need to know that we are looking for now, if there's going to be a subject in the sentence, it's going to have to be a plural subject because our verb is plural. And it's going to have to be nominative because the nominative case is for the subject. So we are looking for a noun with a nominative plural ending. And it just so happens that the very first noun in our sentence has an ending, the long I, that is capable of being nominative plural. It's a second declension masculine ending. So, us, e, o, e, orum, is, os, is. And you heard that long I twice in the chant, the e. It could be genitive singular or it could be nominative plural. But as I said, we're looking for a nominative plural, and so that's what we're going to parse it as. Plural and nominative, and this is a masculine word. There's another reason why it couldn't have been genitive, though. The genitive case is used when one noun describes another noun, much like an adjective would, which means that the genitive case needs to come after another noun. Well, this word doesn't come after another noun. It's the very first noun in our sentence. So it can't be a genitive case noun. It has to be nominative plural, which is what we happen to be looking for. There's only one other noun in the sentence, and that's puel am, right here, puel am, with an am ending. There's a first declension ending. We've already seen that ending once. This is a feminine word, and that ending tells us that it is singular and accusative. Now, we did skip a couple of words. We skipped our adjectives, so we'll go back to those. We have two adjectives in this sentence. First, we have dua. Now, it's the number 2, so it's going to be plural, right? If you have 2 of something, it's going to be plural. So dua is always plural. And because it comes right before pueri, it's describing that word. Numbers tend to come before the nouns that they describe. All other adjectives, like the word parvi, tend to come after the noun that they describe. So both of these adjectives surrounding pueri are describing these boys here. Parvi is not attached to puellam, the noun that comes after it. For one, the adjective normally comes after the noun it describes, but for another, it's got an ending that doesn't match the other ending at all. So as we come to finish our parsing here on these two adjectives, dua is going to be masculine. It could have been neuter by its form, but it's modifying a masculine word, so it's masculine, and it's nominative. So you see it matching pueri, which is normal. Adjectives match the noun they modify in gender, number, case. And then over here we have the exact same ending as our noun, and that makes sense because again we're matching in gender, number, case, masculine, plural, nominative. And you can see there this word cannot possibly modify puellam because they don't match in gender, number, and case. All right, so now all of our parsing is done. We should be able to begin labeling things. We only have one nominative noun. It's pueri, so that's going to be the subject of our sentence. We have an accusative noun, and this time the accusative noun does not come after a preposition. So it's an object, of course, but it's going to be a direct object this time, not the object of the preposition. Everything that's left, just a couple of adjectives. We're going to label those ADJ. That's the normal way that we're going to label our adjectives. And now we should be able to come up with a decent translation for this sentence. Our subject is boys, not boy because it's plural, but boys. The basic sentence is the boys see. But this subject has two adjectives describing it. There are two of the boys, two boys, and then these boys are called small, parwi. So our whole subject phrase is two small boys. You could say the two small boys if you wanted. And then our verb wident is present tense, so it's just going to be see or are seeing. Two small boys see, puellam, our direct object, the girl or a girl. I'm going to say the girl. There we have it. Two small boys see the girl. So in this sentence, we're beginning to see our numbers come into play, other adjectives. We see that numbers, unlike regular adjectives, usually come before the noun that they describe. And we are also seeing a regular use of the accusative without a preposition as a direct object. All right, now for our third sentence. Decem saxa erant prae wallo. Now, our habit is to look at the end of the sentence to see if we have a verb ending. And this particular sentence ends with a word that has an ending that could be a verb ending. It could be. But we don't know any verbs that begin with V-A-L-L. We haven't learned any verbs like that. In addition, if we pay careful attention, we can see that right in the middle of the sentence, we do have a form of sum. So this word at the end is actually not a verb. That's not the first person present tense ending. Instead, our verb is in the middle of the sentence, and it is, in fact, a linking verb. It's a form of sum. Now, you will not be able to correctly parse erant unless you know your forms of sum. And this is from the imperfect tense chant of sum. Eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, erant. You have to know that chant in order to be able to parse this. And that tells us that it's third person plural. Plural because it's in the right-hand column, third person because it's on the third row. Now, we've done our first step. We have found our verb and we've parsed it, even though we had a bit of a challenge finding it at the beginning. Now our job is to parse all the nouns and adjectives and pronouns and other things that we see in our sentence. We actually only have two nouns in our sentence, so we'll start with the first one, which is saxa, saxa. The ending on this is an A. And you might be tempted to think that that is a feminine word that is nominative and singular from I, arm, is, as, is. But if you remember the vocabulary forms, it comes as sox-e. So it's an e pattern verb, which tells us two things about it. One, it's second declension, so it's going to use second declension endings. And two, it's neuter, so it's going to follow the neuter rules. So when we look at our neuter endings, e, o, orm, is, a, is, we have the a in two places. We have it in the nominative plural and the accusative plural. Well, it can't be accusative because linking verbs don't take direct objects, so we can rule that out. But also, we're looking for a nominative plural noun because our verb is third person plural. So we're going to parse this as neuter, plural, and nominative. That's how we're going to parse it. We have one other noun in the sentence, the very last word of the sentence, which we've already said is definitely not a verb. It actually comes from another neuter noun, wallum, wally, the e pattern once again. So we want to go through that chant in our head, e, o. We see the o in two places, in the dative singular and in the ablative singular. But we have a preposition in front. And we cannot have a dative following a preposition. Pry actually takes the ablative, so we shouldn't be surprised by this. So now we know that this is ablative. It's singular, and we've already said that it is neuter. We don't really have any other words to parse. We do have the number 10, decim, in our sentence. But the rule is that any number above 3 until you get to 100, any number above 3 does not change its forms. Therefore, we don't have to parse it. If we were going to parse it, we would just want to parse it in a way that matches the noun that comes after it. In this case, nominative, plural, and neuter. So technically, decim is neuter, plural, nominative, but we don't need to really parse it at all. Now we just need to label everything. Decim, a number, is an adjective. Soxa, being nominative, is our subject. Pry is a preposition, and then wallow is going to be the object of the preposition. Now we should be able to translate. The subject is rocks. Soxum, soxy means rock, but this is plural. So now we have 10 rocks, and erant is going to be translated were. The imperfect forms of sum are translated was or were. Were, pry means before or in front of. We'll go with in front of. Wallum means wall. So wallow in front of the wall. There we go. 10 rocks were in front of the wall. All right, guys, so we've done 3 basic sentences. We've done 2 with an action verb and 1 with a linking verb. Our last sentence we're going to make a little bit more complicated so that we can see some other issues that we need to make sure that we know how to deal with, how to properly translate. So this last sentence is going to be a little bit longer than the others, with a few wrinkles in it, but nothing terribly difficult. I just want you to pay attention and recognize how walking through the steps of translation can really help you with a sentence that at first appears to be a little difficult. All right, so as promised, here we have a sentence that is a little bit longer and a little bit more difficult. Whenever you have a long sentence like this, one of the first things you should do is ask, is this a compound sentence? We know in English that means we're looking for a conjunction like and or but to join essentially two sentences together. And we have one of those. The word et in Latin, right here, means and. And so we can go ahead and label it as a conjunction, and now we know that we have essentially 2 sentences that we're dealing with. And so since we know we have 2 sentences, we're going to look to the end of both of those sentences to see if there are any verbs. And in fact, what we see are 2 verbs that, interestingly enough, have the exact same endings. Punyabunt, and then punyabant, and then ebont. Both of them have that bont ending. And that is going to help us when we come to parse them now. We can parse them essentially the same way. Now I'm going to zoom in on these words to help us so that our parsings don't get in the way of one another. But as we parse ebont, it comes from one of our irregular verbs, eo ire, which means to go. And so when we say the imperfect tense chant for that, it's ebam, ebas, ebat, ebamus, ebatus, ebont. So it has a regular ending on it, but it's kind of strange. It's going to be third person plural, and then as I said, imperfect tense. Those are the imperfect forms, third person plural. So it means They went or they were going. They went or they were going. Now let's move on over here to punyabant. Again, same ending, so the parsing should be easy for us. We're going to have third person plural, imperfect tense. Now, I do want to give you a quick reminder in terms of pronunciation. When we have this GN together, it makes the NY sound, like in the word lasagna. So it's punyabant, punyabant. All right? Okay. So now we can back out and take a look at our whole sentence. And looking at our whole sentence. Oops, that's still not the whole sentence. Goodness, that's long. All right. Looking at our whole sentence, we can go ahead and label both of these as verbs, because that's what they are. Both of them are action verbs. And now we can begin the work of parsing everything else. I prefer to parse the nouns first. Find those, parse those. So let's do that. We have a few nouns in this sentence. In the first half of the sentence, we have the noun equis, from equus equi, for horse. And then we have the noun viris, from vir weary, man. And then we have the noun proilium, which means battle, from proilium, proilii. Again, we're going to have to zoom in on these in order to fit our parsings in. Now, you'll notice here that equis comes after a preposition. So even though there are two possible parsings with this "is" ending on it, is, os, is, could be dative, could be ablative. Since it comes after a preposition, we know that it's ablative because datives don't come after prepositions. And it's masculine. The us-e pattern is always masculine, equus, equi, and it's, of course, plural. We have the same ending over here, viris. Again, it comes after a preposition. You can see the preposition cum right here. Let's see if I can mark that. There we go, preposition cum. There is an adjective in between, but don't let that fool you. Cum viris, cum viris. So when we parse this, also going to be masculine, plural, ablative. And then finally, we have one more that we want to parse, and that's proilium, proilium. Now, this is a neuter noun, proilium, proilii. The e pattern is second declension neuter. It's a neuter word, which means it could be either nominative or it could be accusative. But we're going to rule out nominative for a couple of reasons. The easiest reason is that we have a preposition right here, and nominatives do not follow prepositions. But another reason to rule it out is because we have a plural verb, and we need a plural nominative if we're going to have a noun as our subject of this sentence. So, we can go ahead and parse this. I've already told you that it is neuter. Is on the left-hand column, therefore singular, and we've limited it down to accusative. All right, so that takes care of all the nouns in this half of the sentence. But it doesn't take care of all of our adjectives, because we have a couple of adjectives in this half of the sentence. One of them is here, tres. The other one is here. We've already underlined it once, but duobus. Tres and duobus. Both of these are numbers, and the numbers 1, 2, and 3, unus, tres, and dua, can be parsed. That is, they do change their endings, so we actually do need to parse these. So, tres is going to be nominative, and it's going to be plural because it's the number 3. Tres, trium, tribus, tres, tribus. It could have been accusative, but accusative doesn't make any sense in this sentence. So we're going to go with nominative and plural. Now, this is one of those interesting phrases. Tres ex equis. It's a phrase that we learned, a number followed by x. It's going to mean something like 3 out of or 3 of. So 3 of the horses. Now, this entire phrase is going to function for us as kind of like a subject phrase. We don't have to label it that way. We don't need to put any sort of label over the whole phrase, but we know that altogether it's functioning as our subject. But for now, for our parsings, that tells us that the number 3 is in reference to the horses. It refers to horses. And since horses is a masculine word, we're going to parse 3 as masculine. All right, now moving over to the number 2, this form of duobus. When we go through our chant, we notice that duobus occurs in all 3 genders, and it occurs in both the dative and the ablative. Well, it has to be ablative. We've already seen the dative cannot follow a preposition, so we know that it's ablative. We know that it's plural. And the only way really to know its gender is to look at the noun that it's describing, and that happens to be the word men, which is masculine, so we're going to label it as masculine. All right, so that takes care of everything in the first half of the sentence in terms of our parsings. Let's see if we can get everything right here on the page. All right, maybe we can put some labels on these. So, trace is simply an adjective. Ex, we've said, is a preposition. That means equus is functioning as the object of the preposition. Here we have another preposition, followed by an adjective, and the object of the preposition. And then another preposition with another object of the preposition. Those prepositional phrases are actually make identifying, labeling the nouns that come after them pretty easy. So that takes care of the first half of the sentence. In the second half of the sentence, we really only have one word to deal with, and that's the word inimikos, which means enemy. That's not surprising. So when we come to parse that, we're going to recognize, first of all, that this is a second declension masculine word. The only place we actually see that os ending is in the second declension masculine. It's going to be masculine, plural, accusative. If you go through your chant, us, e, o, e, orum, is, os, is. There's the os. And I like to remind myself that all the words between the ises, is, os, is for the masculine, is, a, is for the neuter, and even in the first declension with feminine words, is, os, is. All the words between the ises are accusative plurals. So we've got that taken care of. There's a conjunction in front of it, but no preposition. That means accusatives without a preposition. That's going to be labeled the direct object. Now, it's the direct object of this verb, not the verb that occurs before the conjunction. So, zooming back out so that we can fit our whole sentence on one page here. There we go. Now we can translate everything. So, in the first half of the sentence, ibant, which we said means were going or went, is going to be our verb. It's third person plural. We're going to have to reach way back. We don't have a noun that's functioning as a subject. We have no nominative nouns, but we have this whole phrase. We have a nominative adjective, and it's the beginning of a phrase. 3 of the horses. 3 of the horses. So that is our subject phrase. So, 3 of the horses, of the horses, and then another prepositional phrase, with 2 men, just with 2 men. With 2 men, in plus accusative is into battle, went. Now in English we would probably say 3 of the horses went or were going into battle. We're having to rearrange things for English word order. With 2 men. That's the first half, so we can put a comma. Now comes the second sentence. And punyabant, they were fighting. Were fighting. The ba of the imperfect is always translated as was or were. That ba that you see right here, it's always translated was or were. So, is they, were, and then our stem means to fight. So they were fighting, and they were fighting, and then our direct object, the plural form of the word enemy. So that's going to be the enemies, or just enemies. So you can see that what initially looked like a very difficult sentence is not too bad. Once you fundamentally divide it into 2 separate sentences, and then when you're able to mark off those prepositional phrases like ex, ekis, and cum duobus, and then, oops, I'm sorry, cum duobus viris, and then in proelium. You see those prepositional phrases, you know those are all packed together, so they're not going to impact anything else. Sentence is a little bit simpler at that point. 3 of the horses were going or went into battle with 2 men, and they were fighting the enemies. All right, I hope this video is at least a little bit helpful for you guys. I wanted you to see that even with a sentence that can appear to be initially difficult, if you will follow the steps, find the verb and parse it, then parse everything else, label everything, and finally translate. If you'll follow the steps, even a sentence that looks really difficult can be simplified. There won't be any sentences this long or this complicated on your test, but I want you to see that the process actually works, and it can make a sentence that looks very difficult, if not simple, then at least a little bit simpler.